Hey guys, tonight we slip into the dusty hills of Bethlehem, where the air hums with the faint twang of a shepherd's harp. Picture yourself sprawled on a scratchy wool blanket, stars prickling the sky like scattered coins. A teenage David, all gangly limbs and sun-browned skin, fumbles with a small, curved harp, its strings buzzing under his calloused fingers. Sheep bleat lazily nearby, oblivious to the kid who'll one day tame a king's heart. This is no fairy tale you're in ancient Israel, where life's tough, and a shepherd's only luxuries are a good tune and a cool breeze. Fair warning, you probably won't survive the boredom of accounting sheep without David's music to keep you sane. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Relax, let the world fade, and focus on the soft plink of those strings. Now, dim the lights, close your eyes, and imagine. And let's begin Tuddy's journey together. You're trudging through Bethlehem's outskirts, the ground gritty under your sandals. The village is a cluster of mud brick houses, their flat roofs glowing under a fat moon. David's out here, maybe 15, guarding his family's flock. He's not your typical hero scrawny, with a mop of dark hair and a habit of talking to his sheep like they're old pals. His harp, a simple thing of wood and gut strings, is his only companion when the nights drag on. You can almost smell the damp wool and hear the faint crackle of a dying fire. David strums absently, testing notes that drift over the hills. It's not just a hobby music's his escape from the monotony of shepherd life. Now, here's a strange event straight from the Bible. Young David's music isn't just for sheep. The book of Samuel hints he's already got a knack for soothing troubled souls. Villagers whisper about a boy whose tunes can hush even the rowdiest drunk at a festival. You catch a glimpse of him playing for his brothers, who roll their eyes but secretly tap their feet. It's like David's got a superpower, one nobody's quite figured out yet. Scholars still argue whether his skill was pure talent or something divinely sparked God's early nudge toward a bigger stage. Let's talk quirky for a second. Harps back then weren't the gilded orchestra giants you're picturing. David's was probably a kinnor, a portable, lyre-like thing with maybe 10 strings. Max. Think less angelic strummer and more DIY ukulele vibes. Craftsmen carved them from almond wood, and the strings gut from goats, stretched tight and twangy. You can imagine David cursing under his breath when one snaps mid-tune. It's oddly charming. This kid wrestling with a finicky instrument while his sheep wander off. You're still in the fields, watching David experiment. He's not just plucking random notes, he's mimicking the wind, the bleats, the rhythm of hooves on stone. You notice how the sheep settle when he plays. Their restless shuffling replaced by a calm you can almost feel in your bones. It's like the whole hillside exhales. You wonder if David knows he's on to something bigger than bedtime lullabies. The village elders don't pay him much mind yet. But you hear murmurs from passing traders that Jesse's kid plays like the stars are listening. Here's a light jab. Imagine David trying to pitch his music to a modern talent scout. So, you play Sheep Lullabies next. But back then, his audience was tougher than any record exec. Restless flocks and sleepless nights. You smirk, picturing him strumming with one hand while shooing a stray lamb with the other. It's a hustle, and he's nailing it. You shift on your blanket, the night air cooling your skin. David's harp carries a melody now, simple but haunting, like it's pulling memories from the dirt itself. You're not just hearing music, you're seeing a kid on the cusp of something massive, his fingers stumbling toward destiny. The Bible doesn't say much about these early gigs, but you can feel God's hand in it, like a quiet director nudging the set. David's no king yet, just a shepherd with a song. But you're hooked, aren't you? Those notes are weaving a spell, and you're sinking deeper into the story. You're still in Bethlehem's orbit, but now you're slipping through the shadows of a royal court. Far from David's sleepy sheep, the air's thick with olive oil lamps and whispered worries. King Saul, Israel's first monarch, is unraveling. You see him slumped on a throne of cedar and bronze, his eyes sunken, his fingers twitching like they're chasing ghosts. His advisors hover, useless, as his moods swing from rage to despair. But here's the strange event from the Bible. An evil spirit from the Lord torments Saul. A divine curveball that's got everyone spooked. You're standing in the corner, feeling the room's tension like a too tight sandal strap, when a servant pipes up about a Bethlehem kid David whose harp can chase demons away. Picture Saul, a towering man who once wrestled Philistine warriors, now reduced to a jittery mess. You can almost hear his uneven breaths, smell the sweat on his brow. The Bible doesn't spell out what this evil spirit is. Scholars still argue whether it's God testing Saul, a mental breakdown, or something supernatural with fangs. You lean toward the spooky, don't you? It's more fun that way, whatever it is. Saul's desperate, and David's music is his last shot at peace. Here's the quirky tidbit. Ancient Israelites believed music could wrestle spirits, not just any tune. Mind you, harp strings were thought to vibrate with cosmic order, like God's own playlist. You smirk, imagining Saul's court debating whether a flute or drum might work instead. Nah, stick with the harp, someone mutters, probably picturing David's kinnor as a Holy Ghost buster. It's odd, this mix of faith and acoustics. But you're intrigued, aren't you? The court's betting on a shepherd to fix their king. You're watching Saul's advisors send a messenger to Bethlehem. The guy's probably grumbling, I'm fetching a kid with a guitar for this. You follow him through dusty trails, back to where David's still strumming for his flock. The messenger's arrival stirs the village like a stone in a quiet pond. You hear whispers. Saul wants our David. The locals aren't sure whether to be proud or terrified. David's dad, Jesse, scratches his beard. probably wondering if this is a royal prank. Now, let's poke fun at Saul for a second. Imagine him as your grumpy uncle who snaps at everyone but melts when the right song plays. Turn that noise off, he'd bellow, until David's harp hits, and suddenly he's humming along, pretending he's fine. You chuckle, picturing Saul's tough guy act crumbling under a teenager's melody. It's almost too easy. You're back in the court now, feeling the weight of stone walls and heavy expectations. Saul's not just a king, he's a man losing his grip. And you're close enough to see the cracks. His crown sits crooked. His hands clench the throne's arms. The Bible says this spirit departs when David plays. But you're not there yet. Right now, you're stuck in the prelude, where hope's a faint flicker. You wonder what David's thinking. Summoned to face a king's madness with nothing but a few strings. Does he know God's got his back? Or is he just a kid faking confidence? Here's another light jab. If this were a modern gig, David's probably got imposter syndrome. Me, play for the king. I just jam for sheep. You grin, imagining him practicing in a panic, his sheep bleating like unimpressed critics. But there's something magical about his music. Even now, you can almost hear it. A soft ripple of notes that doesn't just fill the silence, it reshapes it. You shift closer to Saul, noticing the faint tremble in his shoulders. The court's holding its breath, waiting for a miracle. You're not sure if David's harp will work, but you're rooting for him. The Bible's clear. His music soothes Saul's soul, at least for now. You're itching to see it happen, to feel those notes unravel the king's torment. But the messenger's still en route, and David's still in Bethlehem, oblivious to the royal summons. You're caught in the story's slow burn, and it's deliciously tense. You're back in Bethlehem, but now you're nosing around a cramped workshop that smells of sawdust and sheep fat. An old craftsman, beard streaked with gray, hunches over a half-finished harp, his fingers coaxing almond wood into a gentle curve. This is where David's Kinnor was born, and you're here to unravel its quirky secrets. The air's warm, heavy with the tang of drying gut strings stretched across a drying rack. Outside, kids chase a stray goat, their shouts mingling with the faint twang of a test drum. The Bible doesn't dwell on the harp's craft, but it's the backbone of David's story. So let's linger here, soaking in the oddity of ancient Israel's favorite instrument. Here's the strange event the Bible hints that music, like David's, was more than art, it was a bridge to the divine. In 1 Samuel, Saul's torment eases only when David plays, suggesting the harp's notes carried a holy weight. You picture the craftsman muttering prayers as he works, believing each string might channel God's calm. Scholars still argue whether this was cultural superstition or a literal miracle. Did the harp itself matter? Or was it David's faith? You're leaning toward a mix of both, aren't you? It's like the instrument was a tuning fork for the soul. Now, The quirky tidbit, these harps weren't solo stars. Ancient Israelites often paired them with drums or flutes at festivals, but David's kinnor was a loner's tool. Built for portability, you see the craftsman testing the frame, barely bigger than a modern guitar. The strings made from sheep intestines took days to cure, and you wince imagining the smell. Fun fact, if a string snapped, you couldn't just order a replacement. Someone had to slaughter another sheep, and you're betting David's brothers made him do the dirty work. It's a far cry from today's mass-produced gear, and you're charmed by the grit of it. You're circling the workshop now, noticing tools scattered on a clay bench, chisels, a bone awl, a lump of resin for polish. The craftsman's hands move with a rhythm that feels almost musical, like he's composing the harp's future songs. You can't help but connect this to David. Out in the fields, his own fingers dancing over strings. The kinnor's design is simple, but clever, light enough to sling over a shoulder, sturdy enough to survive a shepherd's rough life. You imagine David dropping it in the dirt once or twice, cursing like any teenager before brushing it off. Let's toss in a light joke picture. David trying to sell this harp on a modern app. Slightly used kinnor, smells faintly of sheep. Perfect for calming kings or livestock, you chuckle, imagining the buyer's confusion. But back then, this instrument was no joke. It was a shepherd's lifeline, a way to stay sane under endless stars. You're still in the workshop, but your mind drifts to the broader culture. Harps weren't unique to Israel. Egypt had them. Strung with flax. Mesopotamia's were bigger, flashier, inlaid with shell. Yet Israel's kinnor was humble, like its people. You see the craftsman nod to a trader who mentions David's growing reputation. That kid's got a gift, he says, not knowing he's crafting the tool of a future king. You feel the weight of that, the quiet ripple of destiny in a dusty village. Here's another jab. If this craftsman had a Yelp page, he'd brag, 5 stars, made a harp that saved a king's sanity. You grin, picturing him carving his initials into the wood, hoping for a shout out. But there's no fame here, just skill and sweat. And you're oddly soothed by the simplicity. You're stepping outside now. The workshop's warmth fading as Bethlehem's cool night wraps around you. The harp's done, ready for David's hands. You can almost hear its first notes, raw and unpolished, drifting over the hills. The Bible ties this instrument to God's plan, but right now, it's just wood and string, waiting for a shepherd to make it sing. You're sinking deeper into the story, aren't you? The craftsman's work is done, but David's about to pick up the tune. You're back in Bethlehem's fields, the night air sharp with the scent of wild thyme and sheep dung. David's out here, same as always. His kinnor slung across his lap as he watches his flock shuffle under a sky dusted with stars. You're sprawled nearby, feeling the grit of rocky soil through your cloak, listening to the soft plink of his strings. This kid's no ordinary shepherd. His music's starting to turn heads. You're here to catch the moment when Bethlehem's sleepy villagers begin whispering about their local harpist. His tunes weaving a reputation that's about to outgrow these hills. Here's the strange event from the Bible. David's music isn't just charming sheep anymore. In 1 Samuel, his skill with the harp is already known beyond his family, enough that Saul's court hears of it. You picture a trader, maybe a cousin of Jesse's, bragging at a market about that kid who plays like gods whispering through him. It's not fame yet, but it's a spark, and you're close enough to feel its warmth. Scholars still argue whether David's talent spread naturally or if God nudged the gossip along Destiny's PR campaign. Maybe. Now, the quirky tidbit shepherds like David often sang to their flocks, but not always for art's sake. Some used music to mask predator sounds, think less serenade, and more drown out that wolf's howl. You smirk, imagining David's sheep grazing calmly while he strums to cover a jackal's rustle. His kinnor, that simple wood and gut contraption you saw in the workshop, doubles as a survival tool. It's practical, not poetic. And you're tickled by how unromantic that feels. You're watching David now, his fingers more confident than a few months ago. He's not just playing random notes, he's crafting melodies that echo the hill's curves. The wind's sigh. You notice a few villagers lingering nearby, drawn by the sound. A woman with a water jar pauses, her toddler swaying to the rhythm. An old man, leaning on a stick, mutters, "Kids got something." You can almost taste their curiosity, like dust kicked up by a passing cart. David doesn't notice. He's lost in his music. His sheep, his only critics. Let's slip in a light joke if David had a band name. It'd be the Bleeding Bards. You chuckle, picturing him headlining a shepherd's festival, his flock as the mosh pit. But seriously, his music's starting to feel like a secret weapon. One Bethlehem's about to lose to a bigger stage. You're shifting closer, the grass damp under your knees. The village isn't big, maybe a few hundred souls, all knowing each other's business. You hear snippets of chatter. Jesse's boy played at the last feast. Or his tunes make you forget a bad day. It's not just the music. It's David himself, gangly, earnest, with a quick grin that disarms even the grumpiest elder. You're starting to see why God picked him. He's not just a harpist. He's a kid who makes people feel lighter. Here's another jab. Imagine David's brothers rolling their eyes. Great. Now, he's the village rock star who's mucking the sheep pen. You grin, picturing their sibling rivalry. But you're betting they hum his tunes when no one's listening. Family dynamics haven't changed much. Have they? Now, let's touch on the broader scene. Bethlehem's a speck in Judah, but it's got heart. You see flat-roofed houses glowing under moonlight. Hear a distant dog bark. The villagers aren't rich, but they're proud. Their lives tied to the land and their faith in God. David's music fits here like it's part of the soil. You're wondering how long he'll stay a local secret. Not long, you suspect. Because the Bible's clear, Saul's court is about to come knocking. You're sinking deeper into the moment, the harp's notes wrapping around you like a warm shawl. David's oblivious to the buzz he's creating, but you feel it, a ripple spreading outward. The strange thing is, he's not trying to be noticed. He's just a kid doing what he loves, and somehow, that's enough to catch a king's ear. You're hooked, aren't you? Waiting to see how this shepherd steps into a palace. You're still in Bethlehem, the village humming with its usual rhythm, goats bleating, women hauling water, kids kicking up dust. But today, there's a new buzz, like a wasp caught in a jar. You're leaning against a sun-warmed wall, catching snatches of gossip. A royal messenger's arrived, dust-caked and grim, asking for David. Not just any David, your David, the harp-strumming shepherd kid. You feel the villagers' eyes darting, their whispers sharp with pride and worry. This is it, the moment Saul's court reaches out, desperate for a fix to their king's unraveling mind. You're here to watch David get the call that'll yank him from sheep to palace. Here's the strange event from the Bible in 1 Samuel. Saul's advisors pinpoint David as the cure for their king's torment, based on nothing but village hearsay. You picture them huddled in Gibeah, Saul's capital, throwing out names until someone mentions a Bethlehemite who plays the harp like God's own hand. It's wild. Isn't it a teenager's side hustle catching royal attention? Scholars still argue whether this was divine matchmaking or just dumb luck, God's plan, or a court grasping at straws. You're betting on the former, but the randomness is delicious. Now, the quirky tidbit messengers, back then, weren't FedEx with a tracking number. This guy probably rode a donkey for days, dodging bandits and baking under the sun, just to fetch a kid with a kinner. You imagine him muttering, "Better be worth it," as he hands Jesse the royal summons, the scroll sealed with wax, maybe stamped with Saul's insignia, and you can almost smell the parchment's musty tang. It's a big deal. Royal orders don't drop in Bethlehem every day. You're trailing the messenger now, his sandals slapping the dirt as he heads to Jesse's house. The village is a maze of narrow paths and mud brick walls, but everyone knows where David's family lives. You see Jesse, grizzled and squinting, open the door. His face shifts from confusion to caution when he hears Saul and harp. You're close enough to catch his low mutter. "What's the king want with my boy?" The messenger's impatient, but Jesse's not rushing. He's a dad, weighing if this is trouble or opportunity. Let's slip in a light joke. Picture the messenger pitching this to his buddies later. "So, I trekked to Bethlehem for a shepherd who moonlights as a therapist." You chuckle, imagining their eye rolls over flatbread and wine. But right now, the guy's all business, explaining Saul's evil spirit and how David's music might fix it. You're inside Jesse's house now, the air cool and dim, smelling of barley and dried herbs. David's there, summoned from the fields, his kinnor still slung over his shoulder. He's all elbows and nerves, hair mussed from the wind. You notice his brothers lurking, half jealous, half curious. The messenger's voice is clipped. The king needs you. Bring your harp. You feel David's pulse quicken. He's never seen a palace, let alone played for a king. Yet there's a spark in his eyes, like he's ready to roll the dice. Here's another jab. If this were a modern audition, David's resume would be a mess. Skills sheep herding, harp noodling, dodging wolves. You grin, picturing him charming a casting director anyway. But back then, talent trumped paperwork, and David's got that in spades. You're watching the family process this. Jesse's torn, proud, but protective. The Bible doesn't say much about this moment, but you imagine him pulling David aside, muttering about staying sharp and not trusting courtiers. The villagers outside are buzzing louder now, some joking that David's off to tame the king's demons. You feel the weight of their faith in God, mixed with small-town skepticism. Will their boy shine or flop? You're sinking deeper into the scene. The moment before everything changes, David's packing light just his harp, a spare tunic, maybe some bread for the road. You can almost hear the kinnor's faint hum as he slings it over his back, ready to follow the messenger. The Bible's clear. This is where his story pivots. From fields to court, from sheep to Saul. You're hooked, aren't you? Waiting to see how a kid with a song faces a king's madness. You're stepping into Gibeah now, Saul's rough and tumble capital, where the air's thick with smoke from sacrificial altars and the clatter of spears. You're at the edge of the royal court, a squat stone building that's more fortress than palace. Inside, King Saul slouches on his throne, his mood darker than a storm over the Jordan. You feel the room's unease, like everyone's tiptoeing around a sleeping lion. David's here, fresh from Bethlehem, his kinnor clutched like a shield. You're close enough to see his knuckles whiten, his eyes wide but steady. This is his first performance for the king, and you're here to watch his harp work its magic. Here's the strange event from the Bible in 1 Samuel. When David plays, Saul's evil spirit flees, leaving the king calm. At least for a bit, you're watching it unfold. David's fingers coax soft notes from the harp, and Saul's clenched fists slowly loosen. It's not just music. It's like the air itself shifts. Lighter, cleaner. Scholars still argue whether this was a miracle, a placebo, or God's direct intervention. You're leaning towards something holy, aren't you? The way those notes seem to push back the shadows feels bigger than psychology. Now, the quirky tidbit ancient courts weren't exactly Carnegie Hall. David's playing in a room with no acoustics, just stone walls and a dirt floor scattered with straw. You imagine the sound bouncing oddly, maybe muffled by the tapestries Saul's wife insisted on hanging. The courtiers, gruff warriors, and nervous scribes aren't clapping politely. They're staring, Half expecting a flop, you smirk, picturing David wishing for his sheep, who at least didn't judge his pitch. You're standing near the throne, the air heavy with cedar and sweat. David's young, maybe 16, his tunic still dusted from the road. He starts slow, testing the kinnar's strings, each note deliberate, like he's feeling out Saul's mood. You notice the king's eyes, bloodshot and restless, fix on the boy. Saul's not sold yet, his jaws tight, his fingers drumming. But then David hits a melody, simple but piercing, like water over smooth stones. You feel your own shoulders ease, and you're not even the one haunted by spirits. Let's toss in a light joke. Imagine David flubbing a note and Saul chucking a goblet at him. Stick to sheep. Kid, you chuckle, but David's too focused for mistakes. He's got that quiet grit, the kind that makes you root for the underdog. You're watching the courtiers now, their whispers fading as the music fills the room. A grizzled general shifts his weight, pretending he's not swayed. A servant girl by the door sways slightly, caught in the rhythm. You're starting to get why the Bible calls David's playing a gift. It's not just the notes, it's how they seem to reach inside Saul, untangling whatever's knotted his soul. You can almost smell the tension draining, replaced by a faint whiff of hope, like rain on dry earth. Here's another jab. If this were a modern gig, David's set list would be top 10 hits to banish evil spirits. You grin, picturing him with a merch table selling tiny kinnors, but back then, success meant not getting banished or worse. You're impressed by his nerve, standing before a king who's one bad day from a meltdown. You're sinking deeper into the scene, the harp's notes wrapping you like a warm cloak. Saul's breathing slows, his eyes half closed. The Bible says the spirit departs, and you're seeing it. His face softens, the haunted look fading. You wonder what David's thinking. Does he know he's taming a king? Or is he just praying he doesn't snap a string? The courtiers exchange glances, like they're witnessing something unnatural. You feel it too, a ripple of awe that's hard to shake. You're still in the court, the lamps flickering low. David's not done playing, but you're hooked on this moment, the kid from nowhere. His music holding a kingdom together. The Bible's clear. This is where David proves his worth, not with a sword, but with strings. You're itching to see how long this calm lasts, aren't you? For now, the harp's winning, and you're drifting deeper into its spell. You're still in Saul's court, the stone walls swallowing the last echoes of David's harp. The air feels lighter now, like a storm just passed. Saul's slumped back in his throne, his face less haunted, his hands no longer clawing at the armrests. You're standing close, catching the faint scent of myrrh from a nearby lamp. David's still playing, his fingers steady on the kinnor, but you're focused on something weirder the moment that evil spirit bolts. You're here to ponder what just happened, why those notes chased off whatever was tormenting the king. and what it means for David's gig. Here's the strange event from the Bible. Samuel says the Spirit, sent by God, flees when David plays, like it's allergic to his music. You're watching Saul's eyes clear, his shoulders sag, and you swear the room itself exhales. It's not just a mood lift. It's like something invisible scrambles out the window. Scholars still argue whether this was a literal demon, a metaphor for Saul's madness, or God's way of flexing divine stage direction. You're picturing a shadowy thing slinking off, annoyed at David's perfect pitch, aren't you? It's spooky but oddly satisfying. Now, the quirky tidbit: ancient Israelites thought evil spirits could be bullied by sound. Not just any noise, harp music, with its orderly vibrations, was believed to restore cosmic balance. Like God's own white noise machine. You smirk, imagining a priest scribbling. Step 1, hire harpist. Step 2, evict demon. It's wilder when you learn some neighbors, like the Egyptians, used harps in exorcisms too. David's kinnor, that scrappy little instrument, is basically a spiritual Swiss Army knife. You're circling the court now, noticing the courtiers' faces. They're not sure what they just saw. Saul's calm, but nobody's clapping like it's a concert. A scribe in the corner scribbles furiously, probably logging harp kid, 1 evil spirit 0. You feel their mix of relief and suspicion. David's just a teenager, his tunic still flecked with Bethlehem dirt, yet he shifted the room's whole vibe. You're wondering if he feels the weight of it, or if he's just glad he didn't flub a note in front of the king. Let's slip in a light joke picture. That spirit whining to its demon buddies later. I was tormenting a king. Then this kid with a harp ruined everything. You chuckle, imagining it sulking in some metaphysical timeout. But seriously, David's music is doing something nobody else in this court can manage. You're closer to Saul now, his breathing slow and even. The Bible's clear. This relief is temporary. But for now, it's real. You notice David's posture relaxed but alert, like he's ready for Saul to snap any second. The kinner's notes are softer now, a gentle ripple that keeps the calm anchored. You're starting to get why God picked this kid. It's not just skill, it's a quiet courage, strumming in the face of a king's unraveling. Here's another jab, if this were a modern therapy session. David's billing Saul for music-assisted exorcism. 1 hour, you grin, picturing him handing over an invoice while Saul's still dazed. But back then, payment was survival. And David's earning his keep. You're sinking deeper into the scene. The harp's hum wrapping you like a soft blanket. The courtiers are whispering again, some praising David, others side-eyeing him like he's too good to be true. You catch a servant muttering about Bethlehem's magic boy, and you're reminded of those village whispers you heard earlier. The story's spreading. Isn't it David's not just soothing Saul, he's planting roots in a court that's half in awe, half on edge. You're still here, the lamps burning low, casting long shadows, The Bible doesn't say how long David plays, but you imagine him keeping at it until Saul's practically snoring. You're hooked on this moment, the kid from the hills, his music a lifeline for a king. It's not just about the spirit's retreat. It's about David proving he belongs, even if nobody, including him, fully gets it yet. You're drifting, aren't you? Ready to see where this harp takes him next. You're back in Bethlehem, the village buzzing like a kicked beehive. You're leaning against a low stone wall, the kind goats love to hop over, catching the hum of gossip as it ripples through the streets. David's royal gig is no secret anymore. Word's out that Jesse's boy played his harp for King Saul himself. And now, the locals can't stop talking. You smell fresh-baked barley bread from a nearby oven. Hear kids reenacting David's performance with sticks for harps. You're here to soak in the village's reaction, where pride, envy, and wild rumors swirl around their hometown hero. Here's the strange event from the Bible. David's music doesn't just soothe Saul. It sparks a reputation that reaches back to Bethlehem. As 1 Samuel implies, with the court's quick trust in his skill. You're hearing it in the chatter. Our David, calming the king's demons. It's not every day a shepherd gets a royal summons, and the villagers are eating it up. Scholars still argue whether this buzz was organic or divinely amplified God's way of setting David's stage. You're picturing a heavenly nudge in those whispers, aren't you? It's like Bethlehem's gossip mill got a divine press release. Now, the quirky tidbit ancient gossip wasn't tweeted. It traveled by foot, often twisted like a game of telephone. You imagine a trader telling a neighbor, David's harp banished a spirit. By the time it hits the next village, it's David wrestled a demon with music. You smirk, picturing the locals embellishing, maybe claiming David's kinnor glowed or summoned angels. It's charmingly human, how they spin a good story. And you're betting half the village believes he's part prophet now. You're wandering Bethlehem's paths now, past mud brick houses with laundry flapping in the breeze. A woman at a well, her jar balanced on her hip, brags to her friend, "My cousin saw David at the court." Saul smiled. An old man nearby scoffs, muttering about fancy harps and city nonsense. You feel the split. Some see David as their golden boy. Others think he's in over his head. You're close enough to catch the pride in their voices, though, like they all own a piece of his success. Let's toss in a light joke picture. Bethlehem's elders starting a fan club. David's harp hype crew join now. Bring your own kinner. You chuckle, imagining them arguing over who knew him first. But seriously, this gossip's building something bigger than David's ready for. You're pausing by the market, where traders unload figs and pottery. A merchant from Gibeah, still dusty from the road, spills details. The king was raging. Then David played, and poof, calm as a lamb. You notice the listener's eyes widen, their nods quick, It's not just about the music. It's the idea that their boy faced a king's madness and won. You're starting to see David as they do a kid carrying Bethlehem's name into Saul's world. You're wondering how he'll handle the spotlight. Here's another jab, if this were today. David's trending on the ancient equivalent of social media. Hat the harp hero. Local teen slays royal demons. You grin, picturing the likes rolling in. But back then, fame meant pressure, and David's still just a kid with a kinner. You're slipping deeper into the scene, catching a whiff of roasting lentils from a nearby fire. The gossip's not all rosy, some mutter about Saul's temper, warning David's in a lion's den. You hear a shepherd, one of David's pals, defend him. He's got God's favor. Mark my words. The Bible doesn't dive into Bethlehem's reaction, but you feel its pulse here, hope mixed with fear for their boy. You're reminded of that workshop where his harp was crafted, the strings you saw stretched tight. Now, those strings are pulling a whole village along. You're still here, the sun dipping low, painting the hills gold. The gossip's a living thing, weaving David's name into something larger. You're hooked on this moment. The kid's not even back from Gibeah, but Bethlehem's already claiming him as their own. The Bible's clear. David's music is his ticket, but it's also a spark, lighting up stories that'll outlast him. You're drifting, aren't you? Eager to see how this village pride plays out when David steps back into their world. You're stepping out of Bethlehem's gossip swirl and into a quieter space where the hum of David's harp feels like a distant echo. Picture yourself in a cozy lamp-lit room, the kind where you'd sip tea and ponder life's oddities. You're here to unravel why David's music works like a charm on Saul's troubled mind, diving into the soothing science, or maybe magic, of those ancient strings. The air's warm, scented with cedar and imagination. And you're ready to explore what makes a simple kinnor more than just wood and gut. Let's settle in and pick apart this calming spell. Here's the strange event from the Bible in 1 Samuel. David's harp doesn't just distract Saul, it drives out an evil spirit, leaving the king relaxed, like he's had a divine nap. You're picturing those notes, soft and steady, wrapping Saul's frayed nerves like a wool blanket. It's not just a one-off. The text implies it happens every time David plays. Scholars still argue whether this was God's power, a psychological trick, or both. Did the harp itself hold sway? Or was it David's faith strumming through? You're leaning toward a holy spark. But the science is tempting, isn't it? Now, the quirky tidbit: ancient folks weren't wrong about music's power. Even today, studies show slow, rhythmic sounds like David's kinnor can lower heart rates and ease anxiety. Back then, they didn't have brain scans, but they knew a good tune could tame a bad mood. You smirk, imagining an Israelite healer prescribing 3 harp sessions daily for Saul's fits. Fun fact: some ancient cultures used specific scales, like pentatonic ones, to mimic natural sounds, which soothed better than chaotic noise. David's melodies, probably simple and repetitive, were like ASMR before it had a name. You're sinking into this idea, your mind wandering to how David's music works. Picture yourself in Saul's court again. That stone-walled room you visited earlier. The keener's notes aren't loud, they're intimate, like a whispered secret. You imagine them vibrating through the air, syncing with Saul's breathing, slowing it down. It's not just the sound, it's the rhythm, steady as a heartbeat, that pulls the king back from his edge. You're starting to feel it yourself, aren't you? The way a gentle tune can make your shoulders drop, your worries blur. Let's toss in a light joke. If David were a modern therapist, he'd market harp healing sessions, demons not included. You chuckle, picturing him with a website and a waiting list. But back then, his only client was a king, and his only tool was that scrappy kinnor, strung with sheep gut, just like the one you saw in that Bethlehem workshop. You're digging deeper now, considering how music fits into Israel's world. The Bible's full of it: horns at Jericho, songs in the Psalms. David's harp isn't just a tool. It's part of a culture that sees sound as sacred. You're picturing priests chanting, shepherds whistling, kids banging makeshift drums. Music's everywhere. But David's got a gift for wielding it like a shepherd's staff, guiding Saul's mind back to calm. You're wondering if he practiced for this, out in those fields, or if it's just instinct, honed by lonely nights. Here's another jab. Imagine Saul's courtiers trying to DIY this fix. "Get me a flute player," one barks, only to watch Saul chuck a sandal at the poor guy. You grin, knowing David's the only one who nails it. His kinnor's not fancy, but it's perfect for the job. You're still in this reflective space, the lamplight flickering. The Bible doesn't explain the how of David's music, but you're piecing it together. Maybe it's the repetition, the way his notes loop like a lullaby. Maybe it's faith, David trusting God's got his back. Even in a king's court, you're reminded of those Bethlehem whispers, the villagers calling him Magic Boy. They're not wrong. There's something otherworldly about how he plays. You're sinking deeper, feeling the calm of those notes, even without hearing them. You're hooked on this puzzle, aren't you? The way a teenager's harp can quiet a king's storm. The Bible's clear. David's music is a lifeline, not just for Saul, but for the story unfolding. You're ready to slip back into that court, to see how this soothing spell holds up when the king's mood shifts again. You're back in Saul's court, the air heavy with the scent of burnt oil and old leather. The stone walls seem to lean in, trapping the faint hum of David's kinnor as he plays for the king. Saul's calmer now, his eyes half closed. But you're catching a new vibe, something sour, like milk left too long in the sun. You're close enough to see the king's jaw tighten when a courtier whispers David's name with too much admiration. You're here to notice the first stirrings of Saul's jealousy, a slow poison creeping in as David's fame grows quietly. Note by note, here's the strange event from the Bible in 1 Samuel. Saul's relief from David's music starts to curdle into resentment. A shift that's subtle but real. You're watching it now. Saul's gaze lingers on David, not with gratitude, but with a flicker of suspicion. The kid's harp is saving him. Yet Saul's starting to see a rival, not a savior. Scholars still argue whether this jealousy was purely human, Saul's ego bruised, or if God's hand stirred the pot. Testing both men, you're picturing a divine chess move, aren't you? It's messy, but it fits the story's stakes. Now, the quirky tidbit ancient kings weren't exactly chill about sharing the spotlight. Saul's court was a snake pit of egos, where a teenager with a harp could accidentally steal the king's thunder. You smirk, imagining courtiers keeping score, David's soothing score. 10. Saul's moody outbursts. 12. Fun fact, royal jealousy wasn't just drama. It could mean banishment or worse. David's playing a dangerous game, and you're betting he doesn't even know it yet, too focused on his strings to see Saul's side-eye. You're circling the throne room, the Kinner's notes soft but steady, like a heartbeat holding the place together. David's oblivious, his head bowed over his harp, fingers dancing through a melody that's become his signature. You notice the courtiers, though some nod approvingly. Others whisper behind their hands. A scribe mutters, "The boy's too good," and you catch the edge in his tone. It's not just Saul. The whole court's starting to feel David's presence, like a pebble rippling a pond. Let's slip in a light joke picture. Saul starting a petty group chat. "Who's this harp kid stealing my vibes?" You chuckle, imagining the courtiers' emojis, swords, and angry faces. But seriously, Saul's ego is a ticking bomb, and David's music is unwittingly winding it up. You're closer to Saul now, his fingers drumming on the throne's arm, a rhythm out of sync with David's tune. The Bible hints at this moment Saul's heart turning. Even as his mind clears, you're feeling the tension, like a string stretched too tight. David's still young, his tunic patched from Bethlehem's fields, but his music's making waves. You're wondering how he handles the stares, the whispers that follow him out of the room. Does he sense Saul's mood shifting? Or is he just a kid doing his job? Here's another jab, if this were a reality show. Saul's confessional would be gold. "I'm the king, not some shepherd's backup dancer." You grin, picturing him storming off set. But back then, his jealousy was no game. It was a spark that could burn David's future. You're sinking deeper into the scene, the harp's notes weaving through the court's unease. The courtiers are split. Some see David as a gift, others as a threat to Saul's shaky rule. You're reminded of Bethlehem's gossip, those villagers calling him Magic Boy. That magic's working, but it's also painting a target on his back. The Bible's clear. Saul's jealousy grows as David's skill shines. and you're seeing the first cracks in their fragile truce. You're still here, the lamps flickering, casting shadows that dance like Saul's doubts. David's playing on, his music a lifeline for a king who's starting to resent it. You're hooked on this slow burn drama, the kid's just trying to help, but he's stepping into a king's insecurities. The Bible doesn't say how David feels, but you imagine his stomach nodding, sensing the room's shifting air. You're drifting, aren't you? Ready to see how this jealousy plays out in a court where music's no longer enough. You're trudging through Bethlehem's dusty hills again, the air sharp with the tang of dew-soaked grass. David's back home, at least for now, his kinnor slung over his shoulder like it's part of him. You're following him as he herds his sheep. But he's also lugging a bigger load, his new role as Saul's part-time harpist. You're here to trail this double life, where he's bouncing between muddy fields and a king's court, juggling sheep and royal expectations. The sun's low, painting the rocks gold, and you're catching the rhythm of a kid stretched thin but still strumming. Here's the strange event from the Bible in 1 Samuel. David shuttles between Saul's palace and Bethlehem without missing a beat, playing for the king one day, guarding sheep the next. You're watching him now, whistling to a stray lamb while his fingers twitch, like they're itching for his harp. It's a bizarre split court musician by day, shepherd by dusk. Scholars still argue whether this was logistical. Saul only needed him sometimes, or a sign of David's humility, staying grounded. You're picturing God's hand keeping him tethered to both worlds, aren't you? It's a balancing act that feels divinely choreographed. Now, the quirky tidbit shepherds weren't exactly high society, but they were tough multitaskers. David's not just herding, he's dodging wolves, mending fences, and now, apparently, soothing kings. You smirk, imagining his to-do list: milk goats, scare jackals, banish evil spirit. Fun fact, ancient shepherds often traveled light, so David's kinnor was probably his only luxury, doubling as entertainment and a weapon. If he swung it hard enough, you're charmed by the image of him lugging it to Gibeah, strings buzzing with every step. You're walking beside David now, his sandals kicking up dust. He's quieter than you'd expect, maybe chewing over his last court session. You notice his brothers in the distance, hauling water, their glances half proud, half annoyed. Back from the palace, Harp Boy one teases, but David just grins. You're feeling the weight of his routine mornings in the fields, then a donkey ride to Saul's court when summoned. The Bible doesn't spell out how often he travels, but you're betting it's exhausting. His tunic patched from too many nights on the road. Let's slip in a light joke picture. David trying to explain his side hustle. Yeah, I herd sheep and de-stress a king normal week. You chuckle, imagining his friend's blank stares over flatbread. But seriously, this double life is no small feat for a teenager, and you're rooting for him to keep it together. You're pausing by a stream now, Where David lets his flock drink, he pulls out his kinnor, testing a few notes that ripple like the water. You're reminded of that workshop where his harp was made, the craftsman's careful hands. Those strings are holding up. Just like David, under pressures most kids would buckle beneath. You're wondering how he stays so calm. Maybe it's faith, or maybe he's just too busy to overthink. The villagers, you recall, are buzzing about their magic boy. But out here, he's just David, keeping his sheep in line. Here's another jab if this were a modern gig economy. David's 5-star rating would read, "Great harpist, also smells like sheep." You grin, picturing him juggling apps for palace tunes and flock fixers. But back then, his only boss was Saul. And God. Of course. Who seems to have big plans? You're sinking deeper into this scene. The kinnor's faint hum mixing with the bleats and breeze. David's life is split, but he's making it work. His music a thread tying Bethlehem's hills to Gibeah's court. You're catching glimpses of his resilience checking a lamb's hoof, then practicing a melody for Saul. The Bible's clear, this phase shapes him, grounding him before the crown comes. You're hooked on this kid, aren't you? Watching him navigate 2 worlds with nothing but a harp and some grit. You're back in Saul's court. The air thick with the musk of wool tunics and flickering lamp oil. The stone walls loom, cold and unyielding, as courtiers mill about, their whispers sharper than a shepherd's sling. You're standing in the shadows, watching David strum his kinnor, its notes a fragile tether holding Saul's mood in check. But something's off. The king's eyes narrow, and the room feels like a pot about to boil over. You're here to sense the palace intrigue unfolding, where David's growing presence stirs suspicion and power plays among Saul's inner circle. Here's the strange event from the Bible in 1 Samuel. David's success with Saul doesn't just spark jealousy in the king, it ripples through the court, creating a web of tension. You're seeing it now. A general shifts uncomfortably when Saul praises David's harp. A scribe mutters about that shepherd boy getting too cozy. It's not just music anymore. David's a wild card in a court obsessed with loyalty. Scholars still argue whether this intrigue was political courtiers fearing a new favorite or divine, with God stirring drama to test David's path. You're picturing a heavenly scriptwriter, aren't you? Tossing in plot twists. Now, the quirky tidbit: ancient courts were gossip factories, but they also ran on favors and grudges. You smirk, imagining a courtier's mental tally: David's harp, +5. My cousin's flute guy, 0. Fun fact, courtiers often back their guy to curry favor with Saul. So David's rise unsponsored, straight from Bethlehem, ruffles feathers. You're betting some nobles already plotting to swap him for a less talented, more controllable musician. It's a soap opera, and David's the new kid stealing the spotlight. You're weaving through the crowd now, catching snippets of hushed talk. A warrior with a scarred cheek grouses, "The boy's no soldier. Why's he here?" A priest nearby defends David, citing God's favor, but his voice wavers, like he's not sure himself. You feel the room's pulse admiration for David's skill, clashing with fear of change. Saul's on his throne, calmer than last time, but his fingers tap restlessly, like he's counting David's notes and his own insecurities. You're close enough to smell the king's cedar-scented cloak, heavy with the weight of his crown. Let's slip in a light joke picture. The courtiers starting a betting pool. 10 shekels says, "Saul boots the harp kid by next moon." You chuckle, imagining them passing coins behind Saul's back. But seriously, this intrigue is no game. David's talent is a threat to the court's pecking order. You're focusing on David now, his head bowed over his kinnor, oblivious to the stairs, his melody steady. But you're wondering if he senses the undercurrent eyes tracking his every move, whispers questioning his motives. The Bible doesn't say he's clueless, but he's young, maybe too focused on Saul to notice the bigger game. You're reminded of Bethlehem's gossip, how the villagers called him Magic Boy. Here, that magic's a double-edged sword, drawing awe and envy in equal measure. Here's another jab, if this were a modern office. David's the intern who accidentally outshines the boss, who invited the kid with the guitar. You grin, picturing a courtier slamming a scroll in frustration. But back then, the stakes were higher. Displeasing Saul could mean exile or worse. You're sinking deeper into this scene. The kinnor's notes a soft contrast to the court's hard edges. The intrigues thickening. Some courtiers see David as a tool to wield against rivals, others as a threat to their own influence. You catch a noblewoman's sly smile, like she's already scheming to use David's fame for her own ends. The Bible's clear. This court's a crucible, shaping David's future as much as his harp does. You're feeling the tension, aren't you? Like a string pulled taut, ready to snap. You're still here. The lamps casting jittery shadows. David's playing on, his music a fleeting calm in a room full of schemers. You're hooked on this drama, the kid's just trying to help Saul. But he's stirring a hornet's nest. The Bible doesn't spell out every whisper, but you're piecing it together. David's rise is a spark, and this court's dry tinder. You're drifting, eager to see how he navigates this maze of egos and ambition. You're stepping out of Saul's scheming court and into a quieter, almost mystical space, where the hum of David's kinnor feels like it's threading through the stars. Picture yourself on a hillside at dusk, the air cool, scented with wild sage and distant campfires. You're here to explore the ancient belief that music, David's music, could tame not just kings, but the very forces of the unseen world. The night's calm, but there's a tingle in your spine, like you're brushing against something bigger than a shepherd's tune. Let's dive into the spiritual power of those harp strings. Here's the strange event from the Bible in 1 Samuel. David's playing doesn't just soothe Saul, it repels an evil spirit from the Lord, a force that flees like it's been banished. You're imagining those notes, soft but relentless, pushing back a shadow only Saul can feel. It's not a one-time trick. The text says it happens whenever David strums. Scholars still argue whether this was God's direct intervention, a cultural view of music as holy, or a mix of faith and psychology. You're picturing a divine sound wave, aren't you? Clearing the air like a celestial broom. Now, the quirky tidbit: ancient Israelites saw music as a cosmic tool, not just art. Harps, like David's kinnor, were thought to echo creation's harmony, aligning the world with God's order. You smirk, imagining a priest nodding sagely, strum well, and chaos retreats. Fun fact: this wasn't unique to Israel. Babylonians used lyres in rituals to appease angry gods, and Egyptians believed music could heal. David's harp, that scrappy thing you saw crafted in Bethlehem, was a spiritual heavyweight, its strings vibrating with more than sound. You're settling into this hillside moment, your mind drifting to Saul's court, where you last saw David play. Those notes weren't just calming, they were shifting something deeper, like tuning a misaligned soul. You're starting to get why the ancients revered music. It's not just the melody, it's the belief behind it. David's faith, maybe, pouring through his fingers. You're picturing him in Gibeah, his kinnor, a tiny defiance against whatever darkness gripped Saul. You're feeling it too, aren't you? The way a song can make the world feel right. Let's slip in a light joke. Picture David as a cosmic DJ, spinning tracks to keep demons at bay. Next up, evil spirit, exit jams. You chuckle, imagining him winking at a baffled courtier. But seriously, his music's doing something ancient minds took deadly seriously, bridging earth and heaven. You're digging deeper now. Considering Israel's broader spiritual world, the Bible's full of sound as power, trumpets toppling Jericho, Miriam's tambourine after the Red Sea. David's harp fits this, a weapon of peace in a culture where spirits, good and bad, were as real as the sheep he herded. You're reminded of Bethlehem's gossip, villagers calling him Magic Boy. They weren't wrong. His music feels like a spell, woven from faith and skill. You're wondering how much David believed in its power. Did he pray before playing, or just trust his gut? Here's another jab. If this were a modern spiritual retreat, David's workshop would be harp your way to inner peace. You grin, picturing him handing out mini kinners to stressed out CEOs. But back then, his audience was one king, and the stakes were life and death. You're still on this hillside, the stars brighter now, like they're listening. The Bible doesn't explain why music worked, but you're piecing it together. Maybe it's the rhythm, steady as a pulse, reminding Saul of God's order. Maybe it's David, a kid bold enough to play for a king and believe it matters. You're sinking into the mystery, feeling the weight of those ancient beliefs. The kinnar's not just an instrument, it's a conduit, carrying something holy. You're hooked, aren't you? On how a shepherd's tune could wrestle the unseen. You're drifting deeper, the night wrapping you like a shawl. The Bible's clear. David's music is more than sound. It's a spark of divine calm in a chaotic world. You're ready to slip back into Saul's court, to see how this spiritual power holds up against a king's growing resentment and a court's scheming whispers. You're back in Saul's court, the air heavy with the scent of wax and worry, the stone walls echoing faintly with David's kinnor. You're standing near a pillar, half hidden, watching the young shepherd from Bethlehem work his magic. David's no longer the nervous kid who first stepped into Gibeah. His fingers dance over the harp strings with a quiet assurance, each note landing like a pebble in a still pond. You're here to see him grow into his role, mastering not just the music, but Saul's unpredictable moods. His kinnor a steady anchor in a room full of shifting shadows. Here's the strange event from the Bible in 1 Samuel. David's repeated performances don't just soothe Saul, they sharpen his skill, making him indispensable. You're watching it now. Saul's eyes soften, his restless hands still, as David's melody weaves a calm that feels almost tangible. It's not a one-off. The text suggests David's getting better. His music, a refined tool for taming the king's torment. Scholars still argue whether this growth was natural talent honed by pressure or God's hand guiding his fingers. You're picturing a divine coach whispering, "Nail this chord. Kid, aren't you?" It's a glow-up with holy stakes. Now, the quirky tidbit ancient musicians like David didn't have sheet music or Spotify for inspiration. You smirk, imagining him improvising every session, maybe riffing off a tune he hummed to his sheep back in Bethlehem. Fun fact, Israelite harps were often played with both hands, plucking and strumming. So David's dexterity was no small feat. You're betting he broke a few strings, learning to keep up with Saul's mood swings. Each snap, a reminder of that scrappy kinnor you saw crafted in that dusty workshop. You're closer to David now, noticing the sweat on his brow, the way his shoulders stay loose despite the court's heavy air. His kinnor's notes are smoother than before, less tentative, like he's learned Saul's rhythms, when to go soft, when to linger. You're feeling the shift in him, a teenager finding his footing in a king's world. The courtiers notice too. Some nod with grudging respect. Others whisper about Jesse's boy, like he's a puzzle they can't solve. You're wondering if David feels the change, or if he's too focused on not missing a note. Let's slip in a light joke picture. David practicing in his head, muttering, "Okay, don't botch this like that time with the sheep audience." You chuckle, imagining his flock bleeding through a bad set. But seriously, his confidence is growing. And it's no accident he's learning to read Saul, to play the man as much as the harp. You're circling the throne now, where Saul sits, his face less haunted but still sharp-edged. Bible's clear. David's music is his ticket, but it's also his shield, keeping him vital in a court where favor can vanish like dew. You're reminded of those Bethlehem gossips, calling him Magic Boy. Here, that magic's real, but it's honed. David's not just strumming, he's crafting a spell. Note by note, you're catching his subtle glances at Saul, checking if the king's calm holds. It's a masterclass in quiet control, and you're impressed by this kid's nerve. Here's another jab. If this were a modern band, David's the front man learning to handle a diva lead singer, Saul. Cue the soothing vibes. Pronto, you grin, picturing him rolling his eyes but delivering. Back then, though, the stakes were higher. One bad performance could send him back to the sheep. You're sinking deeper into this scene. The kinnors hum a steady pulse against the court's unease. The courtiers are still scheming, their whispers a low buzz. But David's focus is ironclad. You're starting to see him as more than a shepherd or a harpist. He's a player in a bigger game, one he's learning fast. The Bible doesn't say how he feels, but you imagine a mix of pride and pressure, each note a step deeper into Saul's world. You're hooked, aren't you? On how this kid's growing into a role he never asked for. You're still here, the lamps casting soft glows on the stone. David's music fills the space, a calm that belies the tension you know's brewing. You're drifting, ready to see how his newfound confidence holds when Saul's jealousy, that slow poison you glimpsed earlier, starts to bubble over. You're still in Saul's court, the air thick with the scent of burnt wax and nervous sweat. The stone walls seem to pulse with the weight of unspoken grudges, and David's kinnor hums softly, a fragile thread holding the room together. You're standing near the back, heart pounding, as Saul's mood shifts like a storm cloud. His eyes, once softened by David's music, now glint with something darker: rage, suspicion, or both. You're here to dodge a spear hurled mid-performance, as Saul's jealousy boils over in a moment that could end David's courtly dreams or his life. Here's the strange event from the Bible in 1 Samuel 18. Saul, gripped by his torment, grabs a spear and hurls it at David while the boy plays his harp. You're seeing it now. Saul's hand snatches the weapon, his arm rears back, and the spear flies, glinting in the lamplight. David ducks, the blade grazing past, embedding in the wall with a dull thud. Scholars still argue whether this was a spontaneous outburst or a calculated warning. Did Saul mean to kill or just scare? You're picturing a king unhinged, aren't you? His crown no match for the chaos inside him. Now, the quirky tidbit spears weren't just weapons in ancient Israel. They were status symbols, often carried by kings to flex authority. You smirk, imagining Saul twirling his like a CEO with a fancy pen, only to yeet it told at his teenage therapist. Fun fact, these spears were heavy, tipped with iron, and not exactly aerodynamic. So Saul's aim was either terrible or deliberately off. You're betting David's quick reflexes, honed chasing sheep, saved his skin more than Saul's bad throw. You're frozen in the moment, the court gasping as the spear quivers in the wall. David's still clutching his kinnor, his fingers paused mid-strum, eyes wide but not panicked. You're close enough to see his chest heave, his face a mix of shock and quick calculation. The courtiers are stunned, some gape. Others edge toward the door, like they sense a bigger storm brewing. Saul's breathing hard, his face a mask of fury and regret, like he's already second-guessing his tantrum. You're feeling the room's pulse race, the calm of David's music shattered like a snapped string. Let's slip in a light joke picture, David dodging and thinking. Note to self, add spear evasion to my skill set. You chuckle, imagining him jotting it down later. But right now, he's all instinct, his shepherd's agility kicking in. This isn't his first brush with danger wolves, and lions were his training ground. But a king's spear is a new kind of beast. You're circling the scene now, noticing the details. The kinnor's still in David's hands, unharmed. A quiet callback to that Bethlehem workshop where it was crafted. You're wondering what's going through his head. Does he bolt, play on, or stare Saul down? The Bible says he escapes, but you're caught in the split second before, where survival hangs on a breath. The courtier's whispers start up, low and urgent. The king's lost it, or that boy's got God's luck. You're sensing the shift. David's not just the harpist anymore. He's the kid who dodged a king's wrath. Here's another jab, if this were a modern gig. David's quitting with a scathing review. 1 star, great throne, but boss throws pointy objects. You grin, picturing him storming out. But back then, walking away wasn't so easy. Saul's the king, and David's stuck in his orbit. You're sinking deeper into this chaos. The lamps casting jittery shadows that dance like Saul's mood. The Bible's clear. This spear-throwing marks a turning point. Saul's jealousy isn't just simmering, it's explosive. You're reminded of those court whispers you overheard, the intrigue brewing around David's rise. Now, it's out in the open, a public crack in Saul's reign. You're wondering how David keeps his cool, his kinnor still in hand, his music silenced, but his presence louder than ever. You're still here, the court holding its breath, waiting for Saul's next move. David's alive, but the air's electric with danger. You're hooked on this drama. The kid's talent pulled him into a king's world, but now it's his wits keeping him there. You're drifting, aren't you? Eager to see how he navigates a court where music's no longer enough to keep the peace. You're slipping out of Saul's tense court and into Bethlehem's warm embrace, where the air hums with the scent of roasted barley and blooming jasmine. It's festival time, and the village is alive. Lanterns sway from olive trees. Kids dart through crowds, and the thump of drums mingles with laughter. You're here to join the celebration, where David's kinnor steals the show, his music weaving through the night like a golden thread. The spear incident's a distant echo, right now. Bethlehem's claiming their boy, and you're swept up in the joyous vibe of a community lifting him high. Here's the strange event from the Bible. While 1 Samuel doesn't explicitly mention a festival, it implies David returns home between court visits, and his local fame grows. You're seeing it now. Villagers crowd around as David strums, his harp coaxing smiles from even the grumpiest elders. It's not just music. It's a moment where Bethlehem sees God's favor in their shepherd. A kid who faced a king's wrath and walked away. Scholars still argue whether these homecomings grounded David or fueled his ambition. Was he humble, or starting to feel the spotlight? You're picturing a mix, aren't you? His heart still in the fields, but his eyes on something bigger. Now, the quirky tidbit ancient Israelite festivals weren't just parties, they were sacred, with music as a bridge to the divine. You smirk, imagining a villager boasting. Our David's Harp talks to God. Better than the priest's fun fact, these gatherings often featured group singing. But soloists like David were rare. Their skill seen as a gift from above. His kinnor, that same scrappy instrument you saw crafted, is now a village treasure. Its strings carrying the weight of their pride. You're weaving through the festival now, past tables piled with figs and flatbread. David's perched on a stone bench, his kinnor alive with a melody that's both haunting and warm, like a fire on a chilly night. You're close enough to see his fingers move, quick but relaxed, his face lit by lantern glow. The crowd sways, women clap. Kids mimic his strums on imaginary harps. You're feeling the village's love, thick as the honey they're passing around. They know about Saul, the spear, the court. They're not just cheering a musician, they're celebrating a survivor. Let's slip in a light joke, picture David as the festival's headliner, with a kid shouting, "Play the one that scared the king's demon." You chuckle, imagining him winking and launching into a crowd pleaser. But seriously, his music's uniting this village, turning gossip into glory. You're pausing by a group of elders, their beards flecked with crumbs, muttering about David's gift. One says, "He's got God's ear, that boy." And you're reminded of those Bethlehem whispers calling him Magic Boy. The festival's a showcase for that magic. His notes lift spirits, heal old grudges, make the night feel holy. You're wondering if David feels the weight of their expectations, or if he's just happy to be home, away from Saul's spears and scheming courtiers. The Bible's vague on his emotions, but you're betting he's soaking in the love, even if it's bittersweet. Here's another jab. If this were a modern music fest, David's merch table would sell out Kinner keychains, "I survived Saul" tunics. You grin, picturing fans chanting his name. But back then, his only reward was this moment. Bethlehem's arms, wide open, you're sinking deeper into the scene. The kinnor's hum, blending with the crackle of bonfires. The villagers aren't just celebrating David, they're claiming a piece of his story. Their pride a shield against the court's dangers you glimpsed. You're catching glimpses of his family. Jesse nodding proudly, his brothers half jealous, but clapping along. The Bible's clear these homecomings matter. Rooting David in a community that sees him as theirs, not Saul's. You're feeling the warmth, aren't you? Like a blanket woven from their cheers. You're still here, the stars bright above, the festival pulsing with life. David's music carries on, each note a reminder of his journey from sheep to court. From spear dodging to this, you're hooked on this joy, this brief pause before the king's shadow looms again. Eager to see how Bethlehem's love shapes the kid who's already outgrowing his village. You're stepping away from Bethlehem's festive glow and into a broader, ancient world where the twang of David's kinnor finds echoes in distant lands. Picture yourself in a sun-baked marketplace, not in Israel, but somewhere between Egypt's Nile and Mesopotamia's rivers, where traders haggle over spices and strummed instruments hum in the background. You're here to discover the harp's cultural cousins, the lyres and lutes that share the kinnor's soul, revealing how David's music fits into a wider tapestry of sound and spirit. The air's thick with dust and possibility, and you're ready to trace these musical threads. Here's the strange event from the Bible, while 1 Samuel focuses on David's harp soothing Saul. It hints at a deeper cultural role for music, one shared across ancient societies. You're imagining David's kinnor, its notes not just calming a king, but resonating with traditions beyond Israel's hills. Scholars still argue whether Israel's harps were influenced by neighbors like Egypt or Mesopotamia. Did David's kinnor borrow from their designs? Or was it uniquely Israelite? You're picturing a musical melting pot, aren't you? Where God's people strummed alongside others' sacred sounds. Now, the quirky tidbit, Egypt's harps, unlike David's scrappy kinnor, were often gilded, played by priests in temples to charm gods like Hathor. You smirk, imagining David gawking at one, muttering, "Fancy." But does it scare demons? Fun fact, Mesopotamian lyres, found in royal tombs, had bull-shaped heads, their strings plucked for rituals or parties. David's kinnor, that simple wood and gut creation you saw in Bethlehem's workshop, was humbler but no less potent. Its portability perfect for a shepherd turned courtier. You're wandering this imagined marketplace now, past stalls piled with linen and clay pots. A Nubian trader strums a boat-shaped harp, its twang sharper than David's, but oddly familiar. You're catching the vibe. Music wasn't just entertainment, it was power. Whether soothing kings, praising gods, or marking a wedding, you're picturing David back in Saul's court, unaware his kinnor shares DNA with these instruments. The Bible doesn't mention Egypt or Mesopotamia, but you're seeing the connections. Like strings linking cultures across deserts and rivers. Let's slip in a light joke picture David at an ancient music expo, side-eyeing a flashy Babylonian lyre. Nice bling, but my kinnor's got soul, you chuckle, imagining him sticking to his trusty harp. But seriously, these cultural cousins show how universal music's pull was. Even in David's day, you're pausing by a Mesopotamian bard now, his bull-headed lyre singing under gnarled fingers. The sounds richer than David's, but the intent's the same calm. Connect, transcend. You're reminded of those Bethlehem festival vibes, where David's music unified a village. Here, it's a priestess in Egypt, her harp lulling a crowd during a Nile flood ritual. You're starting to see the kinnor as a small but mighty player in a world where strings spoke louder than swords. You're wondering if David ever heard tales of these instruments, maybe from a trader passing through Bethlehem. Here's another jab. If this were a modern jam session, David's kinnor would be the acoustic guitar stealing the show from overproduced synths. You grin, picturing him outshining a pompous Egyptian harpist back then. Though, his music's simplicity was its strength. Cutting through Saul's chaos like a clean breeze, you're sinking deeper into this scene. The marketplace fading as you focus on the idea of music's shared power. The Bible's clear. David's harp was God's tool, but it wasn't alone. Egyptians, Babylonians, and others wielded sound to touch the divine, just like Israel. You're feeling the weight of that, how a shepherd's tune could echo across cultures, even if David never knew it. You're reminded of those court moments where his kinnor tamed Saul's torment, a skill as old as the Nile's flow. You're still here, the air cooling as stars prick the sky. You're hooked on this broader view. How David's music ties him to a world bigger than Bethlehem or Gibeah. The Bible doesn't spell out these connections, but you're weaving them, seeing his kinnor as a humble cousin to grander instruments. Yet no less holy, you're drifting, aren't you? Ready to return to David's story, where his harp faces new tests in a court, growing darker by the day. You're slipping back into Saul's court, but the air's different now, less stormy, more like a held breath. The stone walls gleam under flickering lamps, and David's kinnor hums softly, its notes a gentle tether keeping Saul's mood in check. You're leaning against a pillar, watching the young harpist, but your eyes are drawn to the faces around him: courtiers, servants, even a priest or two, all drawn to David's quiet charm. You're here to meet his loyal friends, the allies he's gathering in the snake pit of a palace. Their support, a flicker of light in the growing shadow of Saul's jealousy. Here's the strange event from the Bible in 1 Samuel. David's skill and demeanor win him admirers. Even as Saul's resentment festers, you're seeing it now. A young guard nods at David's tune. A servant girl lingers to hear more. Their loyalty shifting from king to harpist. It's not rebellion, but it's a quiet tide. And David's at its center. Scholars still argue whether this was God's favor drawing people to David or just his natural charisma. Did heaven tilt the scales? Or is he just that likable? You're picturing a divine glow, aren't you? But his grin's doing plenty on its own. Now, the quirky tidbit, ancient courts were cliquey, but loyalty wasn't always to the king. You smirk, imagining a courtier's mental note. Back David better vibes than Saul's spear-throwing phase? Fun fact, friendships in these settings often hinged on shared risks. David's spear-dodging stunt. That wild moment you witnessed likely earned him respect from those tired of Saul's tantrums. His kinnor, that same scrappy harp from Bethlehem's workshop, isn't just soothing Saul, it's building a fan base. One note at a time, you're weaving through the court now, catching glimpses of David's allies. There's a scribe, ink-stained and earnest, who slips David extra bread after performances, a grizzled soldier, scars crisscrossing his arms, mutters, "Kid's got guts," recalling how David didn't flinch when Saul's spear flew. You're close enough to see a servant boy mimic David's strumming, eyes bright with hero worship. You're feeling their warmth, like a fire drawing moths. David's not just a musician, he's a spark, pulling people into his orbit without even trying. Let's slip in a light joke picture. David's fan club passing out Team Kinnor bracelets. Join now. Survive Saul's next meltdown. You chuckle, imagining their secret handshake. But seriously, these bonds are his lifeline in a court where envy's thicker than the lamp smoke. You're focusing on David now, his kinnor alive with a melody that's softer today. Like he's testing the room's mood. He's still young, his tunic patched, but there's a steadiness in him, honed by those trips between Bethlehem and Gibeah. You're wondering if he notices his growing crew. Does he see the scribe's shy nod, the soldier's gruff approval? The Bible's vague on his social game, but you're betting he's sharp enough to feel the shift, to know he's not alone. You're reminded of Bethlehem's festival, where villagers cheered him like family. Here, it's quieter, but no less real. Here's another jab, if this were a high school drama. David's the new kid who accidentally starts a clique. Sorry, Saul, my harp's got groupies now. You grin, picturing the king's scowl. But back then, these friendships were survival, not status. You're sinking deeper into this scene. The kinnor's hum blending with the court's low buzz. The allies aren't loud, they're subtle. A glance here, a shared jest there, but they're real. You're catching a priest's murmur about God's anointed, and you wonder if David hears it, if it weighs on him. The Bible's clear, his charms building a network. Even as Saul's jealousy simmers, that poison you saw earlier, these friends might be his shield when the king's mood darkens again. You're feeling their loyalty, aren't you? Like a warm thread in a cold room. You're still here, the lamps casting soft shadows. David's music, a steady pulse. His allies are scattered, but growing. Their faith in him, a quiet defiance of the court scheming whispers you overheard. You're hooked on this slow build. The kid's not just playing for Saul. He's winning hearts. One string at a time, you're drifting. Eager to see how these bonds hold when Saul's rage, that spear-throwing fury, inevitably flares again. You're back in Saul's court, the air heavy with the tang of olive oil lamps and unspoken tension. The stone walls seem to close in, amplifying every whisper, every shift of a courtier's sandal. David's kinnor hums, its notes a fragile dam against Saul's darkening mood. You're standing near the throne, close enough to see the king's knuckles whiten, his eyes glinting with a rage that's no longer subtle. You're here to feel that anger boil. As Saul's jealousy, once a simmer, erupts, his patience with David's soothing harp fraying like a worn rope. The room's a tinderbox, and you're braced for the spark. Here's the strange event from the Bible in 1 Samuel 18. Saul's resentment peaks, his heart twisting as David's popularity grows. Even after the spear-throwing incident you witnessed, you're seeing it now. Saul's jaw clenches when a servant praises David's latest performance. His fingers drum a rhythm that's all wrong for the kinner's calm. The text hints his evil spirit is back, but this feels personal. A king undone by a kid's talent. Scholars still argue whether this rage was divine punishment, God stirring Saul's heart, or just human insecurity run wild. You're picturing a mix, aren't you? Where heaven and ego collide. Now, the quirky tidbit, ancient kings often saw loyalty as a zero-sum game. Praise for someone else was a jab at their crown. You smirk, imagining Saul tallying David's likes like a jealous influencer. Fun fact, Saul's court wasn't just a stage for music. It was a political arena where a harpist could accidentally threaten a king's legitimacy. David's kinnor, that humble creation from Bethlehem's workshop, is now a lightning rod, its notes stoking Saul's fear of being outshined. You're betting he's regretting that messenger he sent to fetch the kid. You're circling the throne now, the air thick with unease. David's playing, his fingers steady despite the king's glare. You're close enough to see sweat bead on his brow, his eyes flicking to Saul, reading the room. The courtiers are tense, some loyal to Saul, others, like those friends you met, quietly rooting for David. You're feeling the shift, like a storm brewing in a clear sky. Saul's not yelling yet, but his silence is louder, his posture rigid, like he's fighting the urge to grab another spear. You're reminded of that earlier missile, quivering in the wall, and you're wondering if David's bracing for round 2. Let's slip in a light joke picture. Saul muttering, "I am the star, not this harp-twanging teenager." You chuckle, imagining him sulking like a diva denied an encore. But seriously, his rage is no laughing matter. It's a king's pride unraveling. And David's in the crosshairs. You're focusing on Saul now, his breathing uneven, his crown slightly askew. The Bible's clear. His jealousy isn't just about music. It's about power, about a shepherd boy stealing the people's hearts. You're catching whispers from the courtiers. David's name's on every tongue. One says, and Saul's scowl deepens. You're wondering how David keeps playing. His Kiner's notes still soft, still trying to soothe a king who's beyond soothing. It's bravery, or maybe faith, that keeps his fingers moving. You're impressed, aren't you? By this kid facing a king's wrath with nothing but strings. Here's another jab, if this were a modern drama. Saul's posting cryptic rants about ungrateful harpists. You grin, picturing the courtiers screenshotting it. But back then, his rage was a real threat. Kings didn't sulk. They struck. You're feeling the weight of that. The danger David's in just for being good. You're sinking deeper into this scene. The kinnors hum a faint pulse against Saul's simmering fury. The courtiers are edging back, sensing trouble. But David's allies, those quiet supporters you saw, hover closer, like they're ready to shield him. You're reminded of Bethlehem's festival, where villagers cheered David's music. Here, the cheers are silent, but the stakes are higher. The Bible's clear. Saul's rage is a turning point, pushing David closer to a destiny he can't yet see. You're feeling the heat, aren't you? Like standing too close to a fire. You're still here. The lamps dimming, casting shadows that twist like Saul's thoughts. David's music is losing its grip. The king's anger too raw to tame. You're hooked on this clash. The kid's talent pulled him into Saul's orbit. But now it's his survival at stake. You're drifting, eager to see how David escapes a court where his harp, once a savior, is now a spark for a king's unraveling wrath. You're stepping out of Saul's volatile court and into a quieter, almost scholarly space, where the air feels like old parchment and candle wax. Picture yourself in a dimly lit room, surrounded by scrolls and the faint hum of debate, as if ancient voices are still hashing out the mysteries of David's harp. You're here to dive into a question that's echoed through centuries. Did David's kinnor hold divine power, or was it just a really good vibe? The world's calm outside, but your mind's buzzing, ready to unpack this spiritual and musical puzzle. Here's the strange event from the Bible in 1 Samuel. David's music consistently drives out Saul's evil spirit. A feat so striking, it feels like more than talent. You're imagining those notes, twanging from that scrappy kinnor you saw crafted in Bethlehem, somehow wrestling a king's torment into submission. Scholars still argue, Whether this was God's literal power flowing through the harp, a psychological effect of music's calm, or a cultural belief in sound as sacred, you're picturing a holy spark in those strings, aren't you? But the debate's too juicy to settle easily. Now, the quirky tidbit: ancient Israelites didn't see music as just art. It was a cosmic force, like gravity for the soul. You smirk, imagining a rabbi scribbling, "Harp, 1 part wood, 2 parts divine Wi-Fi." Fun fact: some ancient texts, like those from nearby Ugarit, describe music calming angry deities, suggesting David's kinnor tapped into a regional belief that sound could shift spiritual tides. His harp, simple as it was, might have been seen as a conduit for God's order, especially when Saul's chaos needed taming. You're settling into this reflective space, your thoughts drifting back to Saul's court, where you last saw David play. Those notes weren't just soothing, they were disruptive, chasing out whatever darkness gripped the king. You're pondering the mechanics. Was it the kinnor's resonance, its vibrations syncing with Saul's frayed nerves? Or was it David's faith, his trust in God, that gave the music its edge? You're feeling the weight of this question, like holding that harp yourself, wondering if its power came from heaven or human skill. Let's slip in a light joke picture: David pitching his kinnor to a modern skeptic. It's not just a harp, it's a demon-zapping machine. You chuckle, imagining the eye rolls. But back then, people bought it. Music was a bridge to the divine. You're starting to see why the Bible lingers on this detail, why David's harp wasn't just a prop, but a player in the story. You're digging deeper now, picturing ancient Israel's broader spiritual landscape. Music was everywhere. Prophets sang, priests chanted, shepherds like David whistled under the stars. You're reminded of that festival in Bethlehem, where his kinnor united a village. The debate over its power isn't new. Even then, people wondered if God was in the strings or the player. You're leaning toward both David's skill, honed in those fields, and a divine nudge, like the one you sensed when his reputation first spread. The Bible's vague on the how, but it's clear on the what. His music worked miracles, at least for a while. Here's another jab. If this were a theology class, students would bicker for hours. Divine power? Nah, just good acoustics. You grin, picturing the professor sighing. But back then, the line between miracle and method was blurry, and David's harp straddled it perfectly. You're sinking into this debate, the room's glow softening as you weigh both sides. On one hand, music's effects are measurable, slow rhythms, calm the heart, just like you explored earlier. On the other, the Bible frames David's playing as God's tool, a holy intervention in a king's unraveling. You're picturing Saul's relief, that fleeting peace you saw in his face, and wondering if it matters where the power came from. The kinnor, that humble creation, carried something extraordinary. Maybe that's enough. You're reminded of those court allies, drawn to David's charm? Was it just his music, or something more? You're still here. The scrolls whispering questions, the debate unresolved. You're hooked on this mystery. Aren't you the idea that a shepherd's harp could channel divine calm, or simply trick a king's mind into peace? The Bible's clear. David's music shaped his path, even as Saul's rage grew. That boiling anger you felt last time. You're drifting, ready to follow David out of this scholarly pause and into the next storm, where his harp and his wits face a king who's running out of patience. You're slipping out of that scholarly haze and back into the raw, pulsing reality of Saul's world. But now, you're on the move. The air's sharp with dust and donkey sweat as you trail David, his kinnor slung over his back, fleeing Gibeah's court. Saul's rage, that spear-throwing, jealousy-fueled storm you felt has pushed things too far. And David's not sticking around to test the king's aim again. You're here to follow his tactical retreat. A shepherd boy dodging a king's wrath. His harp, his only companion as he heads for safer ground. The sun's dipping low, casting long shadows, and you're caught in the urgency of his escape. Here's the strange event from the Bible in 1 Samuel 19. David flees Saul's court after another outburst. His life now at stake as the king's paranoia spirals. You're picturing him slipping out at dusk, heart pounding, the kinnor bouncing against his shoulder. It's not just a getaway, it's a pivot. A moment where David's role shifts from harpist to fugitive. Scholars still argue whether this flight was pure survival instinct or God's nudge, steering David toward his destiny. You're seeing a divine escape plan, aren't you? With Saul's anger as the push. Now, the quirky tidbit, ancient fugitives like David didn't have GPS or a spare horse waiting. You smirk, imagining him navigating by stars, muttering. Note to self, don't trust kings with spears. Fun fact: fleeing in ancient Israel meant sticking to rugged trails to avoid patrols, and David's shepherd days dodging wolves. Knowing every hill gave him an edge. His kinnor, that same scrappy harp from Bethlehem's workshop, is a liability now too loud, too recognizable, but you're betting he won't ditch it. It's his lifeline. Even on the run, you're keeping pace with David now. His sandals crunching on rocky paths. He's young, barely out of his teens, but his eyes are sharp, scanning for movement. You're close enough to smell the sweat on his tunic, patched from those sheep herding days. The Bible's vague on his exact route, but you're picturing him skirting Gibeah's outskirts, maybe aiming for Ramah or back to Bethlehem. You're feeling his adrenaline, the weight of leaving behind the court those allies you saw. The scribe, the soldier, now just memories as he chooses survival over music. Let's slip in a light joke picture, David scribbling a Yelp review mid-escape. Saul's court great gigs, terrible spear-throwing etiquette. You chuckle, imagining him joking to keep his nerve. But right now, he's all focus, his breath quick, his keen oar silent to avoid detection. This isn't the festival star you saw in Bethlehem. This is a kid outrunning a king's wrath. You're pausing as David ducks behind a boulder, catching his breath. The landscape's rough, scrubby hills, olive groves, the kind of place he knows from herding. You're wondering what's in his head. Fear, sure, but also that grit you saw when he faced Saul's first spear. The Bible says he escapes, but you're caught in this moment where every rustle could be a soldier. You're reminded of his double life, juggling sheep and court, and how that's over now. He's not Saul's harpist anymore. He's a target, and you're rooting for him to slip through the cracks. Here's another jab. If this were a modern chase, David's dropping pins on a map app, captioned, "Avoid crazy king, 0-10. You grin, picturing him outsmarting Saul's goons. But back then, his only tech was his wits and maybe a prayer to God. You're impressed by his calm, even now. His kinnor, a quiet reminder of the music that got him into and out of this mess. You're sinking deeper into this scene. The twilight wrapping you like a cloak. David's moving again, sticking to shadows. His path uncertain, but deliberate. You're feeling the stakes. Saul's not just angry, he's hunting. And David's harp, once a shield, is now a beacon if he's not careful. The Bible's clear. This retreat is a turning point, forcing David to lean on his instincts and faith. You're hooked on this flight, aren't you? The kid who tamed a king, now running from one. His music silenced, but his story roaring louder than ever. You're still here, the stars emerging. The night a mix of danger and hope. David's out there, a fugitive with a harp, and you're drifting, eager to see where he lands when the dust settles and Saul's rage can't reach him. You're deep in the wilderness now, the air crisp with the scent of dry earth and wild herbs. The stars burn bright above, a jagged skyline of hills cutting into the night. You're trailing David, his silhouette barely visible as he moves through the rugged terrain, his kinnor strapped to his back like a soldier's shield. He's a fugitive, far from Saul's court and Bethlehem's warmth, hiding from a king's wrath. You're here to listen as his harp echoes in this desolate place. Its notes a comfort to a young man on the run, weaving solace into his lonely exile. The silence is heavy, broken only by the crunch of his sandals and the occasional owl's call. Here's the strange event from the Bible in 1 Samuel 19. David's flight from Saul leads him to the wilderness, where his music, though unmentioned, likely sustains him. As later Psalms suggest, he played in exile. You're imagining him now, pausing in a shallow cave, his kinnor's soft twang mingling with the wind. It's not for a king or a festival crowd, just for himself. A lifeline to to God in a world turned hostile. Scholars still argue whether these moments shaped David's later psalms. Were they born here? In this solitude, you're picturing a divine muse, aren't you? Whispering through those strings. Now, the quirky tidbit ancient fugitives often carried little. But David's kinnor wasn't just baggage, it was a survival tool. You smirk, imagining him strumming to calm his nerves, muttering, better than talking to rocks. Fun fact, shepherds like David used music to stay alert during long nights. And in exile, his harp might have kept him sane. Its familiar weight a reminder of Bethlehem's fields. That scrappy instrument, crafted in that workshop you visited, is now his only companion. Its strings humming with memories of safer days. You're crouching near David now, the cave's damp chill seeping through your cloak. He's young, his face shadowed but resolute, his fingers coaxing a quiet melody from the kinnor. You're close enough to see his breath in the cool air, to feel the weight of his isolation. The Bible's vague on these wilderness days, but you're picturing him here, hiding from Saul's scouts, his music, a private rebellion against fear. You're feeling his solitude, like a stone in your chest, but also his strength, those shepherd instincts, honed chasing lambs, now keeping him one step ahead. Let's slip, in a light joke picture, David serenading a curious fox. What's that? Buddy encore for fugitive blues. You chuckle, imagining the fox scampering off, unimpressed. But seriously, his music's a tether, grounding him when the wilderness feels endless. A reminder of the magic boy Bethlehem adored. You're settling into this scene, the kinnor's notes soft but piercing, like stars in the dark. David's not playing for an audience, but you're wondering if he senses God listening. The melody's simple, maybe one he crafted herding sheep, now reworked for this lonely hour. You're reminded of his court days, soothing Saul's torment, and how that skill's turned inward, soothing himself. You're catching a glimpse of the poet he'll become. The psalms that'll spill from these moments, songs of fear, faith, and defiance. The Bible doesn't say he played here, but you're betting he did. Each note a prayer. Here's another jab. If this were a modern survival show, David's gear list would read harp, vibes, and zero trust in kings. You grin, picturing him outwitting Saul's men with nothing but grit and a tune. Back then, though, survival meant staying invisible, and his kinnor's quiet hum is his only indulgence. You're sinking deeper into this wilderness, the cave's walls closing in. The kinnor's sound a fragile bridge to hope. David's alone, but you're feeling his resilience. The same spark you saw when he dodged Saul's spear. You're wondering how long he'll hide, how his music keeps him whole when Saul's shadow looms. The Bible's clear, this exile is a crucible, forging David into something more than a harpist. You're hooked on this quiet moment, aren't you? Where his strings sing defiance in a world that's hunting him. You're still here, the night deep and cold, David's melody fading into the wind. You're drifting, ready to see how this fugitive finds his way, his kinnor a constant in a life unraveling, its notes echoing the faith that'll carry him through. You're back in Bethlehem's familiar embrace, the air warm with the scent of baked clay and blooming oleander. The village hums quietly, not with festival cheer, but with a secretive undercurrent, as if it's holding its breath. You're slipping through its narrow paths, past mud brick houses where lanterns flicker behind reed curtains. David's back, a fugitive now, hiding from Saul's wrath. And you're here to see the community's quiet support villagers risking their necks to shelter their harp-strumming hero. The night's soft, but there's a taut edge, like a bowstring ready to snap. Here's the strange event from the Bible. While 1 Samuel doesn't explicitly say Bethlehem hid David, it implies he sought refuge in familiar places, and his hometown's loyalty shines through later alliances. You're picturing it, now a baker slipping David a loaf, a shepherd whispering safe routes to dodge Saul's scouts. It's not loud defiance, but a subtle web of aid, woven from love for their magic boy. Scholars still argue whether this was pure devotion or faith in God's plan. Did they see David as a local son or a divinely marked fugitive? You're leaning toward both, aren't you? Their hearts split between pride and prophecy. Now, the quirky tidbit, ancient villages like Bethlehem were tight-knit, where hiding a fugitive was a group effort. No snitches allowed. You smirk, imagining a villager shushing a nosy kid. No, we didn't see any harp guy. Fun fact, loyalty to kin often trumped royal decrees, and David's family, Jesse, his brothers likely rallied the village to keep him safe. His kinnor, that scrappy harp you saw crafted, might be tucked away to avoid attention, but its legend lingers, tying the community to their fugitive star. You're creeping along a back alley now, where a woman, eyes sharp, hands David a water skin before vanishing into her house. You're close enough to see his quick nod, his face gaunt from days on the run. The Bible's vague on these moments, but you're feeling the village's pulse every glance, every hushed word a shield against Saul's reach. You're catching whispers. He's ours, or God's with him. It's not just about David. It's Bethlehem staking a claim, protecting one of their own against a king gone mad. Let's slip in a light joke picture, the village starting a secret Save David club. With a handshake and code words like Kinnor rules, you chuckle, imagining their sneaky pride. But seriously, this support is no game hiding a fugitive could bring Saul's soldiers to their doors. You're impressed by their nerve. A quiet rebellion fueled by faith and familiarity. You're pausing by Jesse's house, its door cracked open, a faint glow spilling out. David's inside, maybe, or slipped to a nearby barn. You're picturing his brothers, once teasing harp boy, now standing watch, their loyalty fiercer than ever. You're reminded of that festival where Bethlehem cheered David's music, and now they're cheering silently, with food, shelter, silence. You're wondering how David feels grateful. Sure, but maybe burdened, knowing his presence endangers them all. The Bible doesn't dive into his heart, but you're betting it's heavy. His kin are silent, but his mind loud with worry. Here's another jab. If this were a modern heist flick, Bethlehem's the crew pulling off Operation Harp Hideout. You grin, picturing them outsmarting Saul's goons with decoys and fake trails. But back then, their only tech was trust, and they're nailing it. You're feeling their courage, like a warm pulse in this cool night. You're sinking deeper into this scene, the village's secrecy wrapping you like a cloak. A boy darts past, probably carrying a message, maybe a warning of soldiers nearby. You're catching the community's rhythm, each act of aid a note in a song only they can hear. The Bible's clear. David's survival hinges on these quiet allies, just like those court friends you saw. But here, it's fiercer, rooted in home. You're feeling their resolve, aren't you? A village betting on a fugitive who once tamed a king with music. You're still here, the stars bright. Bethlehem's silence loud with purpose. David's hidden, but his presence hums. His kin are a symbol of the boy they'll protect at all costs. You're hooked on this covert love, this community defying a king for their shepherd, eager to see how their support carries David through his wilderness days. You're slipping out of Bethlehem's secretive embrace and into a softer, almost poetic space, where the air feels like ink and starlight. Picture yourself in a quiet grove, the kind where David might have paused during his fugitive days, his kin resting against a gnarled olive tree. You're here to trace how his harp inspired the Psalms, those raw, soul-bearing songs that echo through time, born from the same strings that soothed Saul and comforted a runaway shepherd. The night's gentle, the breeze carrying a faint hum, and you're ready to weave the threads of music and poetry together. Here's the strange event from the Bible. While 1 Samuel doesn't directly link David's harp to the Psalms, later scriptures credit him with many of these poetic prayers. Some tied to his wilderness exile you glimpsed. You're imagining him now, strumming in that cave you visited, his kinner's notes shaping words of fear, hope, and faith psalms that still resonate. Scholars still argue whether David wrote them all, or if later scribes wove his legend into the texts. Was he the poet, or just the spark? You're picturing his hand in them, aren't you? Those melodies turning into lyrics under God's gaze. Now, the quirky tidbit, ancient poetry wasn't jotted on paper, it was sung, often to instruments like David's kinnor. You smirk, imagining him as a wandering troubadour, muttering, needs more angst for Psalm 23. Fun fact, psalms were performed, not just read. Their rhythms tied to the harp's plucks, making David's music a blueprint for Israel's worship. That scrappy kinnor, crafted in Bethlehem's workshop, wasn't just a tool for calming kings, it was a poet's pen. Its strings birthing songs that outlasted palaces. You're settling into this grove now. The grass cool under your feet. You're picturing David, his face worn from running, pulling out his kinnor to play something raw, a lament, maybe, or a plea for God's help. You're close enough to hear the strings' faint buzz, to feel the weight of his solitude. The Bible's vague on when he wrote, but you're seeing it here. His music spinning emotions into words. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. You're feeling the Psalm's roots, how they grew from moments like this, when his harp was his only voice. Let's slip in a light joke picture. David workshopping a psalm like a modern songwriter. Too wordy, nah. God loves a long bridge, you chuckle, imagining him tweaking verses. But seriously, his music's alchemy turning pain into poetry is no small feat. You're starting to see the kinnor as more than an instrument. It's a partner in his craft. You're digging deeper now, your mind drifting to the psalm's broader role. They're Israel's soundtrack, sung in temples, whispered in exile, carried through centuries. You're reminded of Bethlehem's festival, where David's harp united a village, or Saul's court, where it tamed a king's torment. Now, in this wilderness, it's shaping something eternal. You're wondering if David knew his songs would endure, or if he just played to survive the night. The Bible ties him to dozens of psalms, and you're betting some were born in these fugitive days. Each note a step toward his legacy. Here's another jab. If this were a modern open mic, David's psalms would steal the show, but he'd still get grief for hogging the stage. You grin, picturing him shrugging. Blame the kinnor back then. Though, his music was a lifeline, its melodies weaving faith into words that still comfort. You're sinking into this moment. Oh, the grove's quiet wrapping you like a shawl. You're picturing David's fingers, calloused from strings and stones, coaxing a tune that's half prayer, half poem. You're feeling the psalm's power, how they capture his heart running from Saul, hiding in caves, trusting God. You're reminded of Bethlehem's loyalty, those villagers shielding him, and how their faith mirrors his own, poured into these songs. The Bible's clear. David's music isn't just for Saul or himself, it's for generations. A legacy strummed on a shepherd's harp. You're still here, the stars bright, the kinnor's echo fading. You're hooked on this poetic thread. Aren't you the way David's fugitive nights birthed songs that still sing of hope? You're drifting, ready to follow his harp one last time, as his story and his music wind toward a final, soothing close. You're easing out of the poetic grove, the echo of David's kinnor, now a gentle hum in your mind, and settling into a final, tranquil moment. Picture yourself on a soft hillside, not unlike Bethlehem's fields where this journey began. The air cool, scented with dew and distant wildflowers. The stars are a quiet canopy. And you're here to reflect on David's music, its soothing power, its role in his story, and the calm it's left in your own heart. His harp, that scrappy creation from a dusty workshop, has carried you through courts, caves, and festivals. And now it's time to let its notes fade into a sleepy goodbye. Here's the strange event from the Bible in 1 Samuel. David's harp doesn't just tame Saul's torment, it marks him as God's chosen. A shepherd whose music weaves a thread through his rise. Exile and legacy. You're picturing him now, maybe back in hiding, strumming softly, his kinnor a constant through every storm. Scholars still argue whether the harp's power was divine or human God's touch or David's skill, but you're feeling both, aren't you? A kid with a song, carrying heaven's weight. The Bible's clear. His music was a spark, igniting a story that outlasts kings. Now, the quirky tidbit, ancient harps like David's were often buried with their owners, seen as too personal to pass on. You smirk, imagining David clutching his kinnor, muttering, "This stays with me, Saul or no Saul." Fun fact, the kinnor's simplicity would, gut strings, a shepherd's touch made it intimate, a voice for David's soul, whether soothing a king or whispering psalms in the wilderness. You're betting it's still out there, in spirit. Its notes echoing in the psalms you traced last time. You're sinking into this hillside now, the grass soft under your back, the night wrapping you like a warm shawl. You're thinking back to those moments David's first strum in Bethlehem's fields, where you sprawled under stars, the tense court where his harp chased Saul's demons, the festival where villagers cheered their magic boy. Each note built his story, from shepherd to fugitive, from harpist to poet. You're feeling the arc, how his kinnor, that humble creation you saw crafted, tied it all together. It wasn't just music. It was faith, courage, a bridge to God. Let's slip in a light joke picture David's harp with a retirement plaque. Kinnor survived spears, kings, and bad vibes. You chuckle, imagining it displayed in a museum. But seriously, its work shaped a king's heart and a nation's songs. You're starting to see why those strings mattered, why they still do. You're drifting deeper, your mind replaying flashes, Saul's spear, missing David, Bethlehem's secret aid, the wilderness where his psalms took root. You're wondering how David felt, carrying that kinnor through it all, its weight a comfort when Saul's rage or exile's loneliness hit hard. The Bible doesn't say, but you're picturing him smiling faintly, strumming under stars like these, trusting God's plan. You're reminded of his allies, those court friends, the villagers who hid him each a note in his song, just like his harp. Here's one last jab. If David's life were a playlist, His kinner's the instrument that never quits, stealing the show. You grin, picturing it headlining Top Shepherd hits. Back then, though, it was his lifeline, and you're feeling its echo now, a calm that settles your own restless thoughts. You're fully here, the hillside cradling you, the stars, a silent choir. The Kinnor's story, David's story, is complete for now. Its notes a gift that soothed a king, birthed psalms, and carried a boy through destiny's wild ride. You're ready to let it fade, aren't you? To close your eyes and carry its peace into dreams. Now, let your breathing slow, each inhale pulling you deeper into this gentle night. The hillsides soft beneath you, the air a whisper of lavender and earth, carrying the last faint hum of David's Kinner. You're safe here, wrapped in the calm his music wove, a calm that's yours to keep. Picture the stars above, each a tiny light, like the notes David played small, but bright enough to guide a shepherd through darkness. Let your thoughts drift, soft as clouds, back to Bethlehem's fields, where a boy and his harp began this tale. The worries of your day, the weight of tomorrow, they're slipping away, aren't they? Like Saul's torment, chased by a melody that knows no time. You're sinking, deeper still, into a quiet where only peace remains. The Kinnor's gone silent, but its echo lingers, a lullaby for your soul. Feel your eyelids grow heavy, your heart slow, each beat a gentle nod to rest. You're not in Saul's court, not in the wilderness. You're here, held by this moment, by God's own calm. Let the stars fade, let the hillside blur, let everything soften into a dream where David's music plays on. Faint, eternal, carrying you to sleep. Rest now, sweet listener, and let this story cradle you through the night.